Okay, cool. I think we can kick off. People can join as we get into it a bit more. So I'm Freya. I'm a senior reporter here at Sifted. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to be talking about how companies can embed AI into their businesses and use it not just to kind of experiment, but really to scale up their operations. So we'll talk about how to identify where to use AI, how to measure, and how to kind of advocate for its benefit internally. And joining me to do so, we have four great panelists. We have Emma Burrows, co-founder and CTO of Portia AI. We have James Mulligan, head of strategy and programs at PhysicsX. We have Harriet Allardyce, client success manager at Sellmyride, and Monique Koster, head of small business for EMEA at Zoom. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll ask all the panelists some questions, but I want audience questions as well. So feel free to type them in the box at the bottom. I will collect some as we go along and then have a section at the end for them as well. So please keep putting those in and I can see them here. Let's get into it. Monique, perhaps let's start with you. Many companies now say they're AI first. As a journalist, it's a bit of a nightmare going through all the kind of comms that talks in that way and knowing how deep that embeddedness of AI actually is, when people are sometimes just kind of adding tools on. What distinguishes an AI first organization from one that's doing some experimenting in your eyes?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Freya. Maybe good to introduce myself properly. I am heading up the small business segment here at Zoom since a couple of years now, and so we talk to a lot of small businesses every day. And what I see is that the companies that are truly AI first, they're not the ones with the flashiest tools generally. They're the ones who've actually cracked adoption. So what we're seeing currently is a massive shadow IT. People are on their personal accounts like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, you name it. And companies have zero visibility into what data is being shared or even what is actually being saved there. So they miss out on that data opportunity as well. And the irony that gets me most is that time generally is what stops people from even starting with AI. So it feels like a black box. So they just don't. But if you think about it, companies miss out then on average on 3 hours per week of time savings per person. So if you have a 20-person business, for example, that's 60 hours a week, which adds up, right? Week after week. So what we do at Zoom, we don't have AI bolted on. It's just built in how we work. So when I join a meeting, for example, my AI companion is already prepared context for me. It then captures what matters, helps me follow up, invisible but powerful. So that's what AI first actually looks like, not adding more tools to your stack, but fundamentally changing how work gets done. And what I see with companies that succeed, they, instead of just adding a tool, they actually start with a real problem, like, for example, saving time, improving quality, or whatever it is. And then they let AI become part of the daily rhythm. So the ones who struggle are generally the ones still stuck in a pilot mode. So they have a team, for example, separately working on AI, testing tools without any real plan for adoption or even how they actually measure success.
So when you talked about lost data, if people are using individual accounts with Claude, etc., I know that that would compromise, that would mean time is lost, but what else is lost in that data typically, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's data that's one of the things that is so important for any company is data. So tracking data, people buy data externally, and to lose that data to an external party and not having it inside to actually look into and analyze, that is, really, really a shame if that would happen. So specifically for small businesses, I think it's extremely important to keep that data in-house.
Emma, perhaps let's go to you. Do you want to introduce Portia a bit more and then talk us through how you think companies should be, if they're at the very start of this journey of working out an AI strategy, perhaps how they should identify the points at which they plan to introduce AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the CEO and founder of Portia AI. We have a product in the market called Resonant that's in private beta at the moment, and it really is focused on creating a shared context and execution layer for product managers, UX designers, etc., who are struggling to keep up with the pace that engineers are now able to move at. Engineering has been hugely accelerated in the organizations that have adopted these tools, but the other layers haven't necessarily managed to keep up with that. So I think that is also a bit indicative of kind of the way you can think about your AI strategy, which is identify a kind of crunch point in the process, whatever kind of workflow it is that you're thinking about optimizing, and then trying to craft the right tooling around that pain point. But I think that the kind of failure mode there is actually not going far enough in terms of not just identifying that pain point and trying to solve that, but trying to go, okay, if we solve that, where is the bottleneck then going to move? And what does that mean, not just for the problem I have today, but the problem that I will therefore have in a month? And that makes the difference between, a team that is going to experiment with a tool for a short period of time and then realize it's just created more problems versus having an internal AI strategy that is actually going to have longevity. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it really does. So does the task begin with kind of mapping out your operations and working? Is that what that would be the kind of
Exactly.
move?
Yeah.
That's interesting. James, do you want to give us a bit more of an intro to PhysicsX and talk us through if some of the points that have already been raised resonate with how you started to think about integrating AI, your first moves into that?
So PhysicsX is looking to apply AI to the way physical products and systems are engineered. And when we talk about engineering here, we're talking about physical engineering, industrial engineering, and manufacturing rather than software engineering. And I think one of the advantages of that is that pretty much everyone at PhysicsX is already kind of working at the frontier, working on foundation models for physics, for geometry, things like this. So we've skipped, I think, a step that a lot of organizations have to overcome, which is kind of the skepticism around what AI can do. There are no skeptics in PhysicsX about the power of this technology. Emma's frame actually on thinking about the workflows and the pain points that needs to be solved there, I think is absolutely the way that we would have gone about it. I guess the advantage we have is that our teams are already doing that themselves. And so shadow AI usage is actually the strongest signal for us on where to think about scaling up AI adoption. All of our engineers, it sounds maybe, terrible to some organizations, but an amnesty on what they're using personally already, and then allowing them to surface that and explain the value to their actual job is probably the strongest signal we found, mainly because there is no adoption challenge at that point. Right? There's no skepticism about what this technology is going to do for them. They've already seen the value of it, and then they can communicate that as champions to the rest of the organization. So I would embrace shadow AI if I was looking to adopt AI at scale at other organizations.
I love the term amnesty used there. Did you so you went and said how did you go about communicating, finding the people that are going to be the pioneers and are using it?
They're not shy.
Okay.
Our engineers are very vocal about where they could be using tools to go faster. The strategy for us when we started to broadly roll out this technology was to actually give everyone an experimental budget, right? So if every individual could feasibly have access to a $200 Claude Max account, we as an organization need to be mirroring that. The money they spend there is not something they have to justify, right? It's there for them to experiment on how they can use this technology to go faster. And if they discover that themselves, then you overcome this massive adoption challenge of trying to convince someone that the workflow needs to change.
On your point you made earlier about that there was no kind of skepticism within PhysicsX, do you or others on the panel have advice if there is somebody dealing with that within an organization? How do you sell this? Or I guess it's some of the points James has made about internal champions who'll sell it to each other, but I'm wondering if other people have had, or Monique, if you have some perhaps advice gained from clients of how to sell it to people who are less kind of attuned to it already.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I love what you said just earlier as well about the shadow AI and how to embrace it, because I think What we do at Zoom, we integrate with a lot, so data doesn't get lost, and we do take that shadow AI as well, because it is indeed very important. James, very good topic. And skepticism, yeah, I think we are an AI first company, so I don't see it as much in my team because everybody's excited about it. But maybe Harriet could share something about her experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Monique. Just to give myself a quick introduction, I work for Sellmyride as the client success manager. My perspective here may be a little bit unique because my role is predominantly like relationship based. So when it comes to adaptation of AI, specifically kind of from where I sit, there is kind of a shyness around, well, what can we use AI for when it comes to relationships? Surely, if you are skillful in your relationship management role, you would have a good gauge on that. And I think kind of real world examples, it's very easy when you work in success or sales to say, I have this winning personality where everybody wants to buy from me or nobody wants to cancel their account. But having kind of real world kind of data that validifies that feeling. So the usual people who I find, or how can AI really help me, or find data on my relationship with someone I've been working with for 4 or 5 years, is just giving real world examples. We did some kind of training pieces where we were giving some of the guys like very typical sales training and all of these things that you've heard throughout the years. Say the customer's name, get 3 no's before you accept it, where when we actually analysed the data that was provided to us from Zoom Revenue Accelerator, instead of focusing on the underperformers and giving them kind of this typical sales training that you could apply anywhere, we looked at top performers and saw what they were doing differently and found it was actually very different to this typical sales training we've been delivering for years. So I think giving these tangible examples of that can really help build trust. So that would be kind of my example of that.
When we talked previously, Harriet, you brought up this interesting point that using AI to look at relationships can remove bias. I think you brought up the example that someone might not think a client will churn, but actually there are signals within that. Can you explain more about that? Because I think we are more used to hearing about the kind of numerical cases for AI adoption. So I was interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like in my role, there's kind of 3 key metrics there. There's like additional revenue or new business, engagement, and then obviously churn. Now, of course, there is like a huge numerical factor in that. How much money are you bringing in? How much money are we losing? But I find that a lot of the go-to analysis is in those numbers, not what got us to those numbers. Um, I think everybody who's worked in customer success, sales, retention has had an experience where a client they felt really connected to, or that they've done a really good job of building a relationship, has had quite a jarring email that they want to part ways. And you go and you explain, you say, I've really bent over backwards for this client. I'm not really sure what it is. Zoom really helps me remove that bias. So I will use Zoom AI Companion. I'll use the data and analytics in Revenue Accelerator to ask for constant feedback. So if I feel that I've had a really positive call, I will fact check that with Zoom that doesn't have this bias. I think as well when it comes to getting champions internally and repositioning yourself maybe as someone who works in kind of client engagement, as somebody who is data first, is saying, my red, amber, green buckets of engagement and risk are verified because of this trend that we've seen over the last 90 days. So it can really help kind of build out processes. It's a fantastic training tool, and it can help you kind of more accurately forecast relationships.
Really interesting. Thank you. Monique, just to kind of cap off the how do you start on all of this section, is there kind of one step that you recommend people take when they're making their first move into thinking about how they transition to AI adoption?
Yeah, great question, because I think the trap that small business leaders generally fall into is thinking that AI will be about doing things faster.
Oh, I think I've lost Monique, but
as well.
oh no,
So I
you're back.
started just, sorry.
You froze for me for a small.
Oh, okay. We're good now?
It'd just be me there, and it's all back. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I started with personally as well, and in my team, is just AI meeting summaries, and this is what I hear amongst our clients as well, just to save time. So instead of writing all the notes and chasing action items, AI is doing that for you. And what actually happened went actually more, a lot deeper, because you can also reflect and get feedback. So it gives me and my team, for example, real life examples of how to improve as a coach, where my team can be more productive, what patterns we're missing, while it's just literally one, click on a button. So that's where, you
Lost you.
which is very impactful.
I think I lost a tiny second of that, but it's now back. It's all right. Great. Let's move on to then actually what are we using? How are we using it? Emma, I know that Resonant is in beta mode, but which kind of uses are you finding the most impactful and interesting in the kind of early days of looking at that?
Yeah, it's been very interesting actually. So we started really with a use case that's kind of more appropriate for medium or larger enterprises who have kind of more conventional processes of software delivery, and we're working with a bunch of kind of larger companies who their challenge is how do they take a very well formulated process with their engineering teams and do that faster. But on the other end of the spectrum, you're really seeing teams that now, because of the tools, are completely changing their ways of working. And so we're actually working with both groups, probably more towards the latter now of those fastest moving teams, because it turns out, as all of the paradigms change, all of the tooling underneath it needs to change as well. And it's not just about accelerating everything, it's also about how do you then add the right gates and consideration points so you're not just shipping loads of AI slop essentially. Yeah, it's been very interesting that the same product can kind of work for both of those groups. We'll see how it develops over time.
You have an interesting perspective because you're selling into these companies. What have you noticed about who the right stakeholder to have internally is? Are you talking to the top? Are you talking to the tech team? Who are you typically talking to when you're integrating the product?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of two predominant people. One is like your kind of like AI native champion or champions. Every organization has them, right? They're really adopting the tools. They are like working on the absolute forefront. And they're great because they are championing the cause, but also there's like a little bit of a caveat there where I think there is such a differential between your AI champion and your like average person in a role that gap can actually be quite extreme and quite hard to bridge for a company, right? And so understanding that, just because AI champion UX designer is now submitting code doesn't mean that everyone in your organization is going to be comfortable using those same tools. So I think that is a real nuance that it is important to understand. But we also spend a lot of time talking to kind of CPOs or heads of product as well, who are looking to think about how they can advance their product management functionality because, engineering has sped up so much essentially.
How have you seen people successfully bridge that distance between the very AI native engineers, for example, and the other employees?
Yeah, I think it depends. You can bridge it to some extent with training. I think it's also just trying to, if you're going to get like one of your AI native champions, for example, to do their training, they need to understand that like not everybody is going to come up to their level, right? That's not necessarily the immediate goal. The Resonant product is kind of designed to be easy to use. You don't have a like terminal that you have to interact with, etc. And so that's actually kind of part of how we can talk to people is like actually it's not as intimidating as a lot of the kind of very AI native ways of working.
James, you've talked us through earlier how PhysicsX kind of worked out which areas to go for and getting engineers to flag that to you. What have you done and what have you found works? I imagine some of it's quite specific because you're kind of a hardware company, but which bits do you think we can take across other companies?
Yeah, so we have an interesting level of pressure on us at PhysicsX. We're defining an entirely new category, the application of AI to the way you think about physics, chemistry, building large physics models, all of these things. We're very much in a race, and if AI enables our engineers to go faster, then that is something we're going to celebrate. We're going to encourage. We're going to keep on doing. I think in some institutions, that there's maybe a little bit of cynicism about what the engineer is creating with AI, and therefore the engineer is probably disinclined to share the fact that they have used AI to build a feature. We don't do that. We celebrate the what our engineers are capable of building with AI, and we encourage others to do the same. We make sure to surface what things have been done. But then we carry on encouraging everyone to take personal accountability and responsibility for what they ship. I don't think we've detached that, and I think that would probably be an anti-pattern long term to say, right, we're just going to stop worrying about what's being shipped by AI. But it's absolutely a competitive advantage, and it would be madness for us not to take advantage of that. So I think engineering is, we're building an incredibly complex platform that's multi-tenant, that is, going into incredibly challenging environments. It's not an easy thing to build. We've hired 100 engineers in the past year. We'd love to hire 100 more, but you just can't hire that fast. So if AI gives us that leverage to be able to build the best possible product for our customers, then that's the space that we're going to spend time on.
Question across the panel, where do you think this is going next? What's one workflow that you think is kind of about to be disrupted, or a tool that you think everyone will be using in a couple of years' time? Perhaps Emma, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this field is moving so fast that, I mean, 2 years' time, I don't know, will we be on the moon? Like, it's just
We can
really...
shorten it to 6 months if you want.
Okay, yeah, I'll take 6 months. 6 months is still a very long time. I think one of the things that we'll see change and adapt is the personalization of kind of customer and user experiences, such that you're not managing a single user interface anymore as like a product or a tech team. You're really managing a suite of kind of personalization tools, and the ability for a customer to say to you, even in a mass market product, I want this to be different, and have that ship very fast. I think that will be a key kind of developing workflow over the next 6 months.
Monique or Harriet, do you have thoughts on, have you seen signals of where companies should be looking next to keep up with the race, as James termed it?
I think for me, a big thing kind of in my position was around AI. Everybody had like the AI scaries, like when it first kind of was being thrown around. But a lot of people were worried, like, is this going to affect like my job? Is this going to replace me? Particularly like in a customer facing role. For me, it's like totally kind of enhanced what I was doing, which is like the polar opposite of what maybe I would have read online or something like that. So I think like what's kind of come first, as I said earlier, is this kind of very analytical, numerical adoption of AI, when actually I feel it really helps enhance meaningful conversations that lead to action and progress. And I think that's kind of a space that is maybe being slept on, because it's very first and foremost looking at the more kind of numerical side of things. So I think that's going to have a really big role to play in like enhancing people's careers in both the creative space and the relationship space.
Monique, do you?
Yeah. No, I agree with Harriet. I think that could be definitely something. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer this question. I'm not an AI guru in that sense, but I do think that is definitely an opportunity. That's could be very much a possibility in the near future, 100%.
We've had quite a few questions already, which is great. So perhaps I'll take a pause from my questions, ask a few of these, and then we can do some more at the end. There's one specifically for you, James, from Ali. At PhysicsX, where does the real bottleneck to scaling AI and engineering workflows sit today? Is it in model performance, workflow integration, or customer readiness? If you want to take that.
Yeah, sure. I think broadly the data is probably the initial bottleneck. If you think about a large language model, then they've been trained on billions of data points that they've largely lifted from the internet. We're training models on physics, and that requires you to find and create training data. So the way that works is if we're going to predict the outcome of a numerical simulation, then we need a whole stack of potential numerical simulations to train that model. The more data we have, the better that model becomes. And we have seen evidence ourselves that the same scaling laws that apply to large language models also apply to large physics models. And there is a world where you have foundation models for physics and chemistry that are good at predicting the performance of, say, the aerodynamics of a vehicle without even having seen that initial design. So data would be a bottleneck. I think the other challenge here for engineering especially is that whereas large language models and their application across whether it being coding agents or assistants or whatever they're currently being used for, we reached a tipping point a number of years ago. Right? The adoption of that is becoming commonplace. You see lots of organizations investing in it, whereas the application of AI to engineering workflows is still at the frontier. Not every organization is thinking actively about how they incorporate that into their existing engineering workflows, which many of which use legacy tooling and ways of working that haven't changed in like 10, 20 years. So I think that there's a journey for a lot of the organizations we work with to go on to understand the value there, and we're obviously there to help them discover that value. But we will inevitably hit a tipping point here the same way that we did, the rest of the world did on large language models, I think.
Yeah. We had quite a few questions on data, which you've also just brought up, James. We have one saying, how do you assess the data from AI tools, especially as the data itself is usually not aggregated at a group level? Emma, and then perhaps Monique, do you want to chip in on that one?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So I don't think we really have the right primitives at the moment for how to think about this within organizations. Most kind of AI tools work on a kind of single player basis where, you have to kind of cultivate your own context management system. But I think this will become a key part of like which tools end up being extremely useful is the ones that are able to like maintain context for teams and organizations. So like that's one of the things we work on at Resonant is how does a team have a shared context? I don't think there are a great deal of tools that are really doing a great job of this yet, or like agents don't really have the right access models either for how they kind of maintain their own data at the right level of permissions. So I do think this will be an area that will evolve rapidly over the next kind of 3 to 6 months as these tools stop being quite so single player and move much more multiplayer, I would say.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that as well, because at Zoom, and I know that maybe a lot of companies still know us just from being meetings alone, but obviously we have very much evolved from that, and we do integrate everything, and we also offer integrations with big large language models out there, which means that you can indeed shift from your meeting, take everything that's happening in there, make it into workflow, add stuff from, like, for example, in a sales company from Salesforce, then use from different tools and apps. And you can also combine everything together and then indeed, ask it questions about, what would be your next step, where to go, what to improve, how to reflect on your day-to-day. And I think we've done a really, really good job of doing that. And I'm still, I know I'm biased, but I'm still very excited about, the platform that we've developed and specifically on the AI. And I can see Harriet is smiling because she's using it as well every day. So yeah, very happy about that.
On a similar topic, we've had a question from Josephine. How do you ensure IP security if your teams are given free rein to AI? This is probably something everyone on the panel has an angle on. Who wants to take it? James, do you want to chip in? You've got a...
Yeah, there's an element of inevitable risk here in terms of what you're giving AI access to. That starts with a better education and a degree of common sense training across the people using those tools. Many of the tools we use internally have zero data retention policies in place as well, which limits the risk of anything that might be considered confidential, both either to us or to our customers reaching someone else's organization. I think that increasingly we need to be careful about what you give AI access to, especially with the likes of Claude releasing things like co-work and being able to access desktops. There really needs to be consideration about what they're going to get access to. I think we're starting to be a lot more thoughtful about those things as these tools gain access to more of your ecosystem.
Anyone else want to chip in on that point?
Yeah, I would just I would agree with what James has said in terms of kind of general IP and zero data retention. I certainly don't think the answer is like local models for most companies. Maybe the very, very security conscious companies, but the trade-off is if you're going to use local models, they really haven't got to the same level as the frontier models yet. And so you have to make a trade-off for yourself. How much do you care about IP security and how much do you care about moving fast, right? Because assuming you believe, which, I think is the predominant belief in the industry, that like these tools make you go faster, you're also in a race for like, can you keep up right now, even if you are a more established business? And I think a lot of kind of more traditional businesses are actually slightly overly focused on this question, particularly if you're in something like e-commerce. The value of your e-commerce business is not your code. It's your brand, it's your loyalty of the customer base, etc., and the physical product. And so making sure that like your IP strategy really aligns with your business strategy is the kind of fundamental answer to this question, in my opinion. But yeah, I definitely also worry more about the tools access, the agent's access to tools within a company than the specific kind of like data IP leakage question from like, conscious use, I would say.
Yeah. I will come back to the next round of questions towards the end, but I thought it's good to talk about how you measure the benefits of an AI tool. I know that there are currently a lot to try. How are you working out which one is effective? How do you go to your CEO and say, yeah, this is the one, here's the evidence for it? Who has experience of that they want to talk through?
I can speak on this, Freya. So when I joined Sellmyride, we're like a relatively small new business, and all of our clientele is over in the US. So naturally, like a lot of my clients, I will never meet. So the same with some of my colleagues. We don't have that face-to-face time. When I kind of first joined, we didn't have like a centralized CRM. And I noticed that everybody was kind of using different bits of AI here, there, and everywhere, and none of it was kind of integrated. So it felt like so much was being lost, which I think as we've kind of touched on earlier as well. I think for me, choosing something that you can really maximize how many people can use it and how many people benefit from it rather than teams working in silo. So kind of obviously I'm presenting from my experience using Zoom at my previous company, but it was important to me to go to my CEO and say, this is how this is going to meaningfully scale like our business overall. So it's important to me when I'm using the AI to continue to prove its benefit, I can do that from different aspects. So I know I've spoken a lot about client relations, but what we've also learned is where we had some bottlenecks, maybe with the product, or this is kind of what our customers are looking for. Can we match that somewhere else? And I think integrating it kind of all over, again, kind of without a centralized CRM, we use Revenue Accelerator, AI Companion, Docs, task management. We have a fantastic success manager at Zoom. So the context that is shared, I'll sit in a meeting and my kind of score, my summary will be shared with like all of my colleagues over in the US. So then they have all of the context. They can go and pitch to kind of like sister businesses based on all of those findings. And it takes out a lot of the verbal communication. And like I said earlier, it's all backed in data. So that's how I presented which one I would prefer to use.
Mm-hmm. Monique, does that chime with how you've seen clients sell it internally and assess benefit? Or I guess you maybe provide ways to assess it.
No, yeah, it's very similar to what Harriet said. Companies would like to have some proof as well, right? And I think proof sometimes is in the pudding, just to share how it's been effective and how it's been working well. James probably can add to that as well when he has those people using the shadow IT. How did they prove that to you?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic that doesn't really get discussed a lot on LinkedIn. So we made a strategic decision to give everyone access to a certain amount of credits for them to be able to experiment. Let's say hypothetically that number is $250 a month, which is the same amount you would get if you had access to, say, Claude Max or something like that. That's 300 employees at $250 a month. That's just shy of a million of investment purely into AI credits, largely with no business case attached to it beyond experimentation, right? So that in itself is a massive decision for organizations. And we have the advantage of it being only 300 people. That quickly stacks up as you scale faster. We've tried to put some degree of structure around this, and we do that two ways. One is that if an engineer exceeds that monthly cap, then we ask them to frame a lightweight business case. Not all of them love it. In fact, a lot of them hate it. But we force them to go through a thoughtful exercise of thinking about what are they doing and how does that contribute to our objectives, to our OKRs, the metrics that matter to us as an organization. Exactly the same thing they would have to do as an individual engineer justifying their own reviews and performance reviews. Right? We're asking them to apply the same logic to the way they spend AI. That in itself has, I think, created a culture of people thinking more thoughtfully about how they're spending these credits, whether they're doing it in an optimized way, whether they really need the most expensive model to do that, and then also built, groundswell for leadership to say, well, yes, that makes a lot of sense. One of our engineers, I think, exceeded their cap and spent something like $750 last month, which really isn't that much. Built a prototype for a new agentic feature on top of our own platform that would have cost millions for us to do with a fully staffed product team. Right, so that's a really easy conversation to have, but the conversation still needs to be had about how it's being spent. I think the other piece there is, I think progressively companies are going to start building, and I think everyone else has touched on this, much better objective telemetry underneath this. Right, there's lots of ways to measure the productivity of an engineer. I mean, we don't use that during performance reviews, and I think that's a bit of an anti-pattern. But there are ways to connect objective outputs to the usage of these things. And I think that starts with, top-down strategic planning, OKRs, metrics that matter, instrumentation around those things. And then you start to create, a path to connect. Well, we're spending money over here, and the return on investment is over here, right? I think this is a fascinating topic and never gets spoken about enough on LinkedIn. Largely, it's people saying, well, you should spend, millions of AI credits if you want to be in, win the race or whatever. And it's just kind of, well, are they selling them? Are they benefiting from those credits? A lot of them are. So, it's a challenging conversation for every organization, I think.
This move from software that was pay per seat to credit must be really difficult for businesses to get around. Yeah, it's interesting. Emma, do you have thoughts on that topic and perhaps how you've integrated ways for people to assess what they're getting out of the product?
Yeah, I think it has to be very tailored to the organization. I think James's example is great because smaller businesses, the kind of tooling, you can have tool sprawl to some extent, and you can actually get quite a good sense of how it is performing just by kind of talking to your team and seeing their output. As you get to a much bigger stage, you really need to be thinking about the overall cost per person. And I think PhysicsX is a great example because it's kind of like halfway between small and very large, and has kind of adapted its own process to measure this itself. But I think one of the key things is also not being subject to like Goddhart's law, right? Which is basically like anytime you like try and define a metric to measure an outcome, it actually becomes kind of like a bit of an anti-pattern. And so making sure that it's actually delivering business outcome as opposed to just delivering a kind of vanity metric of lines of code or whatever is a much more subjective thing usually than just like a clear single metric, which is also why I like James's example, because it has some of that subjectivity in it rather than just being like, well, we measured this, it was a 50% uptick in whatever. But I think the last caveat I would say is just being careful that that last 20% of delivery from like, initial prototype can actually take up a lot of teams' time. And so also having the right processes that balance that out as well.
Can I add a little bit more, Freya, to this as well? Because I think from Zoom, from what we hear from our clients, our AI is included in everything. So it's free. So if you have Zoom, if you have meetings, phone doesn't matter, it's there for your use. So that helps obviously with the conversation. But what Emma and James said actually is very interesting because connecting it to a pain an organization has, I think that's what makes it so valuable and makes it help explain internally a lot more as well, instead of just adding a tool because you need to do AI as well. And I see in small businesses where what obviously is my segment, I see that there's a lot of pain, just look at time savings. So that's already something to use.
On the topic that's been brought up a bit about consolidating, sprawling tools, where do people think we're going as we add new workflows that can be integrated with an AI model? Are people finding they're having more and more kind of companies that they're working with, or when will that start to move into more singular providers? What's the kind of movement of the market, do you think? Perhaps Emma, you're nodding. Maybe you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think things are moving a little bit too fast right now for consolidation, is my intuition. I think we would have all looked at the person in the room that suggested OpenAI was going to no longer be the leader. If somebody had suggested that 5 months ago, you would have looked at them really weird. And now, Anthropic has obviously really kind of piggybacked them. So it's difficult to predict, I think, at the moment would be my feeling.
How do you manage that then, perhaps James and Harriet? How are you, if you're ending up with a load of tools and you want to keep them going for a while, work out which is getting the benefit, how do you manage making a decision?
James, do you want to go first, or are you happy for me to?
Sure. So I absolutely agree with Emma. I think it would be a mistake to lock in to a specific model when there's so much evidence over the past couple of years that one, they frequently leapfrog each other, and two, that they will continue to get better. Yeah. I think a more interesting dimension over time will be their integration into your ecosystem. Inevitably, well, I'm not a prophet, but the likelihood is that the cost of these models will eventually come down, and then I think the value will be how well integrated these tools are into your wider ecosystem of tooling. And I think Anthropic are doing a fantastic job of that. That their feature releases are largely focused on how do we embed the same AI technology, but for more workflows, more tools, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I think that will become more sticky over time. But I agree with Emma, right? Flexibility is important. I think a year ago, we made a decision to continue using Cursor, for example, because it has the flexibility of giving our engineers to try different models when they're writing code. I think that flexibility will be important going forward for a while, yeah.
Something I think because I spend my time writing about fast-growing young startups, that the big incumbents actually signing on to a new tool is often like months of legal process. I think we're so used to the idea that companies can just onboard a load, keep them, move them around, but actually for some huge companies, it's like moving a tanker around, isn't it? Harriet, do you want to chip in on the kind of consolidation? What do you do when you've got loads of tools running at the same time? Which ones do you work out? How do you work out which ones to keep?
For me, I think it's dependent on, I think my perspective here is naturally just quite different just because of the role that I'm in. But the biggest one for me was like everybody was using these like free access kind of, which are fantastic for different reasons, but there was just so much of it. And I think sometimes there can be like an attitude of like, oh, just use AI, which like actually doesn't really tell anybody anything. Do you know what I mean? So I think just for me, I really enjoy using one and seeing like where all of the context is housed, and it helps me personally like build trust. So like everything that we do like across the whole business and all teams is measured. So that includes like the phone conversations as well. So I know kind of the feedback that I'm getting from AI companion has like a really full picture of everything that we're doing. So I think that's kind of where the clear winner was to me, because if we were all kind of using different tools in silo, we're not getting the benefit of learning from each other. So that's really important to me. Like I try to kind of stay within like this one area as much as possible. But again, I think I'm using it in a slightly different way to like most people on the panel. But yeah, I think kind of peeling people away as well from things that maybe they're really invested in or that they feel really benefits them, and winning trust to get them to move over to something else can be quite challenging. But again, just saying this is everything that you can achieve by kind of what we've built out here. Here's the evidence as how it's helping us drive forward and getting their buy-in that way.
Great. We have a few questions from people. We have a bit of time left, so keep adding them in. We have a follow-up for James from Ali again. I feel like you two need to chat. If data is the main bottleneck, where does PhysicsX see the lowest hanging fruit today? Is it in geometry, workflows, simulation, automation, or customer data pipelines?
Yes, we probably should have a follow-up, Ali. I think so. Our focus at PhysicsX is actually around the numerical simulation part of the engineering workflow currently, right? So that's taking situations where numerical simulation might be used to determine the performance of a product, say the aerodynamics of a car, and then leveraging AI to predict the outcome of that simulation. And what that means is that if the simulation takes a long time, then you can experiment with more designs. You can accelerate the path to market for that product. There's loads of downstream value that's generated by that. So that's the focus. And I think actually creating this concept of a data factory around those simulations, and there's a broad swath of potential numerical simulation that we can target across multiple industries, not just automotive, but aerospace and energy and renewables and materials and things like that. That's the focus right now. But I think what Ali is alluding to there is automating the workflows themselves. And I think that's a fascinating question, because actually I think, especially in this space, there's a lot of incumbent tooling that has been around for years. And there are lots of companies that are looking to put an agentic layer on top of those things to abstract the complexity of that tooling so others can do the same thing. And that is a central focus of PhysicsX as well. So maybe a couple of years ago, you would have had to think about very specialist skills to train these large physics models, data scientists, machine learning engineers, etc. You land in a customer environment and that same skill set would be needed. But actually, a lot of that skill and expertise is now embedded into our platform. So putting an agentic layer on top of that is a relatively straightforward thing for us. That means simulation engineers who may have historically not known anything about data science and machine learning can then do the same thing as a data scientist. So that's another big focal area for us. And it's super exciting because it actually means broadening the potential audience to this technology within that space and potentially also driving up adoption of it as well. But yeah, it's a good question.
It is. Question from Maria. When people started scaling AI internally, did you formalize it or did you let it grow or evolve more organically? Formalizing, she's defining as like policy or guardrails or expectations. What do people have to say on that? I don't know who wants to take it.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think it's kind of related to the kind of IP question, right? Like it all depends on your capacity for risk and the potential for things to go wrong. I generally think guidelines are fairly ineffective in this space, right? You kind of almost want hard rules that can be enforced, because the worst failure modes of AI accessing data and production systems can be pretty bad, and guidelines, I think, with people who don't know what they're doing are not very effective, right? So like you'll both slow adoption and also they won't achieve the kind of goals. And so I think trying to think instead about what are the kind of ways that people are sharing best practice so that they educate themselves is probably more effective than top-down guidelines would be my recommendation. But again, it depends a little bit on the risk appetite.
Yeah. Monique, do you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Emma as well. And on top of that, I think training, if you train your teams, either with, information that is publicly available from, the source that you're using internally, or as a company decide on what training to give about, data privacy, security. I think that is something that companies can invest in, and at least have everybody know what is good policy and what isn't for their company.
Great. I think we're at the end of our questions, so we can wrap up unless anyone wants to sneak one in at the end. But I'm sure our panelists would also be up for getting a question after the talk's over. Well, thank you. That was really, really interesting. It's a huge topic. I feel like it's and it's only going to get bigger. So your insights were great. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to our partner Zoom. They have an event on the 22nd of April, which is Zoom Scale Up Summit. It's a 90-minute virtual event bringing together business leaders across EMEA to look at how modern work is evolving. So check that out if you want more discussion on the topics we've talked about today. And there's another Sifted Talks on global growth in the age of AI, which you can get more information on the Sifted website if you want more of this stuff. Thank you to all the panelists. Really, really interesting. I enjoyed the chat. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much, Freya.
Really nice. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.